Guten Tag and welcome to PA Dutch 101. This is video 41 in our series, and we'll be covering the grammar topic known as the subjunctive mood. This is a very high-based ability lesson. It is vital that you have a very good understanding of all of the previous grammar topics that we've covered in the series in order to truly understand and be able to work with this topic. This is usually one of the last topics I cover with students because it requires so much previous knowledge in order to master it. Don't let that scare you away though. You'll be okay. Let's jump into the subjunctive. So what is the subjunctive and when do we use it? Well, the subjunctive is used to express unreal conditions. Things which might be true under other circumstances but that are not true now. I also like to include the idea of like hypothetical situations. So you could be saying, you know, if the weather was nice, I'd go outside and play. Maybe the weather isn't nice, or maybe it is, but you're still not going out. It's a situation that might be true, but isn't. That's the whole idea of when we use the subjunctive. Okay? Here's an example in Dutch. Wanneer ik meer geld had, deed ik een nieuwe machine kaufen. Wanneer ik meer geld had, deed ik een nieuwe machine kaufen. If I had more money, I would buy a new car. Again, I don't have the money, so I can't buy the car, but if I did, then I would. Okay? A prime example of a subjunctive mood sentence. Here's the English translation. If I had more money, I would buy a new car. Notice that, and we'll talk more about this in the video, a lot of times our subjunctive sentences we're going to set up like this, called if-then clauses, but we'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. Okay? The subjunctive mood can be formed in more than one way. I'm going to teach you the way that is most commonly used by Pennsylvania Dutch speakers and writers, and I'm also going to show you the other way so that you have it, and in case you would encounter it if you were reading something, or if you would meet a Dutch speaker that would use the other form, although I find it highly unlikely, but I'll throw it in there anyway. This is the most common form, and the form that honestly is the easier to use of the two, and the one that you'll hear spoken and used the most. So the subjunctive of most verbs is formed by combining a verb with the word date. D-A-E-T. Date. You would use date and an infinitive, so any other verb. This infinitive comes at the end of the clause. So think of date like a modal. It pushes your conjugated verb, but in this case is your infinitive, to the end of a clause or a sentence. Now, date I broke out and conjugated for you because it doesn't necessarily follow every rule, but it does for the most part. For ich date. Date. Du datest. Datest. There's the NS. Date. Date. Mir date. Date. Dear, date. Date. And see, data. Data. Memorize this verb because you need to know how it conjugates in order to use it correctly in the subjunctive mood. Okay? Few example sentences using date. Here's one. Ich date zal machen, wanneer ich meer Zeit heb. Now, there's a lot of things going on in this sentence, and that's why I said it's vital that you've seen the previous videos. The first clause is using the subjunctive. Ich date zal machen. I would do that. Subjunctive. So our form of date plus our infinitive at the end of the clause. Then notice the second clause starts with wann. Wann is a subordinating conjunction, which we covered in a previous video, conjunctions. Notice that our verb then, because of the rule with conjunctions, forces our conjugated verb, in this case, het, which is the subjunctive form of have, to have, to the end of the clause. ich date soll machen, wenn ich mehr Zeit hätte. I would do that if I had more time. Or if I would have more time. Okay? There's the translation in English. Here's another one as a question form. Date du soll essen? Date du soll essen? Again, we're using our form of date, and it forces our verb to the end. Date du soll essen? Would you eat that? Again, it's subjunctive form. It's not that you are eating it. It's not asking you, are you eating it? It's would you. Okay? Now, you can do all the subjunctive you want at this point just by constantly using date plus an infinitive. But there is a second way of doing the subjunctive, which I consider to be the more difficult of the two because it requires a lot more memorization. There are a few verbs, and let me explain. There are a few verbs, however, that have a single form subjunctive all of their own. Meaning these are verbs that you can use in the subjunctive without using date. They have their own form. Now there are, I say a few, actually I think there's more than a few, but I use that maybe not to scare you away. What you need to remember is you're going to have to figure out what that form is because there's no rhyme nor reason as to what the form is. It's kind of like past participles. You got to learn the past participle. You have to learn the subjunctive form of these verbs. What I can tell you is that when you're using them in the subjunctive, you're going to use these conjugation endings. And notice they're a little different. For ich, it's T. For du, it's TSCH-T. For RZNS, it's T. For mir, it's TE. For dir, it's T. And for C, it's TE. This chart and these endings get used when you are using these other verbs that have their own subjunctive form. I included a list of verbs that I would consider, I guess, high frequency subjunctive forms. Again, let me make one thing clear. You do not have to use these. Two of them I would. And you can probably guess which two verbs they are. Have and sei. They have their own subjunctive form, and Dutch speakers will use those specific forms. The other ones I'm going to list, you can opt to use them or not. You can always just use the date plus the infinitive to form the subjunctive. Okay? I want you to understand that. But I want to include this list of verbs so that you know them in case you see them. Okay? So I've given the infinitive, what it normally is, and then in red I give you the subjunctive form. Now that's what you use then and put those endings from the previous slide on the end of these subjunctive forms. So for brauche, in the subjunctive, it's bräucht, bräucht, and that would be would need. All of these put the word would in front of it, you get the infinitive meaning, or the subjunctive meaning, excuse me. Därfe changes to darft, and that is would be allowed. Do, we already know, and that's the one we use all the time. Date, would do, date. Geh, genkt, genkt, would go. Gebe goes to gebt, gebt, would give. This one you gotta know. Have goes to het. This gets used a lot in the subjunctive. This is one where a Dutch speaker would use het instead of saying date plus have. They would just use het. So that one you gotta know. But before we move on, let me go back to this list a minute. I think I can honestly say I've never heard anyone in my family, and I certainly don't say it, say ganked. I would just use date plus gay. That's what my grandparents would say, that's what my parents said. That's what I was raised. And honestly, with all the Dutch speakers I've ever run into, if I've heard this, I don't ever remember it. That's not saying I haven't heard it, but the average, I'm going to say this, the average Dutch speaker would say date plus gay, but I want you to know that if you get a chance to read some Pennsylvania Dutch, there is literature out there and stories that you might see it, so I want you to realize what it is. Okay. There's a couple more. Kenne goes to Kent, would be able to. Meie goes to Mecht, Mecht, would like. Misse goes to mist, mist, would have to. Solle goes to set, set, should. Wisse goes to wist, wist, would know. And wolle goes to wet, wet. Now, set, that's one that does get used. Should I, dot, dot, dot. So use that one, know that one, set. And Kent. This could also be translated as to could. Could. So Kent and set do get used in the subjunctive forms without date. Now, of course, psi is its own special being. And again, this one gets used in the subjunctive, so you got to know this one. It has its own rules, and it conjugates this way. The rules, I guess, aren't different. It's just that the conjugation is a little weird. So for ich, it's wer, wer. For du, it's wärst, wärst. For er, sie, and es, it's wer, wer. For mir, it's wäre, wäre. For dir, it's wert, wert. And for sie, it's wäre. Okay? So memorize this guy as well. Sei, habe, solle, kenne. Those are 4 biggies that use their own subjunctive form. Definitely know those 4. Okay? The other ones, it's up to you if you want to memorize them or not. I just wanted to let you know that they're there. Okay? How we end up using subjunctive the most is in these if-then clauses, what I talked about a little bit at the beginning of the video. Many subjunctive sentences use the if I ... then I would ... Okay, that's how you want to think about it. If I would have more time, then I would travel. For example, this is a typical subjunctive sentence, and really what we're going to be working with too. To do this in Pennsylvania Dutch, we want to use the word wann, for if, and the following equation. And a lot of this will look familiar to you if you watch the conjunction video. So wann, subject, other stuff, verb, and then date. If you're using the date plus verb form, it's going to be that situation. So verb in the infinitive, followed by the conjugated form of date for whatever the subject is, comma, then depending on what you're saying, conjugated form of date, other subject, other stuff, verb, or if it's a situation where you're using one of the verbs in their separate subjunctive forms, like sei, habe, kenne, solle, then you would just have the subjunctive form of the verb here, subject, other stuff, and then you wouldn't need anything else at the end. This will make more sense once we look at a couple sentences. So get this up top, that equation. Here's an example. Wann ich mehr Zeit hätt, det ich reise. Wann ich mehr Zeit hätt, det ich reise. Here we're starting with wann. Now this is a situation where we're using habe, so I'm just using the regular subjunctive form of it, het, so I don't need anything else. Then I'm using a date plus a verb combination, so after the comma comes the conjugated form of date, then ich, then your verb at the end. So this follows this equation. Okay? So that's what you got to do. Alright? Let's practice a little bit of Ewing, and then maybe it'll make a little bit more sense to you. I've given you some sentences in English. This is ones where you might want to pause the video, work them out, and then hit play again to see if you got it right. If Steve would drink coffee, comma, then he would not sleep much. This is an if-then clause, so follow the equation from the slide before. Again, if you want to try it on your own, pause the video and come back. I'm going to keep right on going. If you do this correctly in the subjunctive form, you're going to get this sentence. Wann der Steve Kaffee trinke, det, comma, det net viel schlafe. It follows the pattern that we learned. Wann der Steve Kaffee, verb, trinke, form of date for Steve, comma, date for net viel schlafe, verb at the end. Okay? Here's another one. If he would want it, comma, he would have it. Wann es vet, het es. Here we're using no dates. We're using the subjunctive forms of wolle, which is vet, and het, the subjunctive form of have. So notice when you do that, there are no dates up there, but it's still a subjunctive sentence because we have these forms of the verb. Wann es vet, het es. Okay? If Dave would bring the game, comma, we would be happy. Okay? Now, would be is sei, of the subjunctive form of sei. Now, bring, I would use the date form with that. So let's see. Wann der Dave es Spiel bringe date, wäre mir froh. Wann der Dave es Spiel bringe date, wäre mir froh. Again, we have our wann, our subject, our other stuff, our verb, and then our form of date, comma. In this case, we're using the subjunctive form of sei, so we just use wäre mir froh. Stop. Okay. That's a quick intro and overview of how the subjunctive mood is formed in Pennsylvania Dutch. If you are now watching this video, video 41 in this series, and you've made it all the way through all the other videos, and you can honestly sit down and construct subjunctive mood sentences in Pennsylvania Dutch, I would like to personally congratulate you because you are above and beyond the ability of a lot of other people trying to learn the dialect. Okay? This is an extremely advanced topic, what we just covered. If you can do this, pat yourself on the back. And then I would advise you and encourage you to get out and start using what you've learned. Find the Facebook groups that are out there, if you're on Facebook. If you know people that speak the dialect, relatives, neighbors, family, friends, get out there and speak. Use it. Don't look back and say, oh man, I spent all this time watching these videos and practicing and I don't use it. That's stupid. You don't learn to play an instrument and then not play it. Same thing with this language, and any foreign language you might learn. Now that you have the tools, use them. Get out there. Speak it. Write it. Send me an email and press me and say, thanks so much, look what I can do. But do it in Dutch. I will be so happy for you, and I know that then what I've done here in these videos has hopefully helped the dialect get spread out a little farther and hopefully ensured its place in our future. I welcome comments, complaints as well, concerns, and ideas for future videos at the email address busterpa@yahoo.com. Look for me on Facebook. You can either search me by my name, or there are 3 Facebook groups that speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Kannst du Deutsch schwätzen? Can you speak Dutch? I'm not Amish, but I still speak Dutch. You search that in English. And as Frühjahr für die Muttersprache, a springtime for the mother language or the mother tongue, look for us. There are people on Facebook, and a lot of them, that are using Pennsylvania Dutch every day. It's a great outlet for you to practice, read more, see it, and engage with it. Okay? Thank you for watching all the previous videos. I'm glad that you stuck with going all the way here to video 41. Hopefully there will be some future videos, but as far as the grammar is concerned, we've covered all the major topics now that we've gotten through the subjunctive. So, alles aber gut that you've got this far. Congratulations. And hopefully, bis die nächste Video, and hopefully there will be some more. Macht's gut und schwätzt Deutsch.